Hello, everyone. What's up? This is the third episode of the Youth for Discourse podcast, season two. Very epic. Today, we're going to be talking about healthcare. Yeah, let's jump into it. So, does anyone have any thoughts about, I don't know, people were talking on the chat about Canadian healthcare, or we could talk about different healthcare systems more broadly. Does anyone want to start off?
Yeah, I think
Are
Tristan
you gonna
should
say
go
anything?
first.
Feel free. Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Wait, yes, go.
Peter Dirksen. Peter Dirksen, what do you think?
Um, Basically, I think our healthcare system is like we need
Okay, you
to.
gotta be
Can you
careful
just
about the
dial
audio. Yeah.
You
Am
guys
I
Just a
sound
too
sec.
quiet?
fine.
Okay.
Once
Okay,
it's
okay,
moved
I'll start.
here,
I'll
we'll
start
start
off.
trying
I'll
to
start
sign
off.
each other.
Okay, I think the healthcare is fundamentally broken at the provincial level, and in many other countries they have the same problem. The wait times are just way too long. Not only that are the wait times long, is that it's while it's not expensive, there's a lot of how do I say the word? There's a lot of like hidden fees. Like for example, a lot of services are not covered. Like people still have to do fundraising, and we pride ourselves as Canadian on free healthcare, but it's not exactly free. There's still a bunch of services that are not covered, and it also depends province to province. You can go to Alberta, you have a different result. You can go to Nova Scotia, you have a different result. It's very decentralized, I guess.
So,
Yeah.
do you believe that the federal government should take it upon themselves to provide the healthcare?
No, I think that's too much. It's too much. I think there's a certain giving the government too much power can be problematic in a lot of ways. Like for example, the NHS in the UK, the government has total power, but it's still terrible. Though, as I said, the aforementioned wait times, the costs, like it's still terrible. We us in the UK have the same problem, but the difference is that ours is provincial, theirs is federal.
Are you from the UK?
No, but I know people who are from. I know a lot of people from the UK.
Okay. Yeah, because you're like, oh, this is
Gotcha.
the UK. Yeah. You know, I think I agree that, yeah, there are certain problems with the healthcare system. One of my issues is definitely, yeah, the wait times. And I think that reason for why that's the case is because of the fact that in many cases, we encourage some level of overutilization of our services through having.
Mm.
I'm not for the complete privatization of healthcare like the US does, where if you end up
Uh,
having to pay like $100,000 because you break your arm, I'm not for that. But at the same time, it seems like having zero penalty for going to the doctor means that you're going to incentivize people who may not need the services
they
as
don't
much as
really need
another
it.
person to have those
Exactly.
services.
I disagree. I disagree because I believe the reason because of the wait times is actually the fact that the Canadian system uses triage. So basically, what we do is we take the people who are in need the most and we treat them first, and the people who are in need the least, we treat them last. And that's called triage. It's basically done whenever there's a lot of people who need the same service, and it's I believe that is the reason for the wait times is because people who have less severe conditions are waiting longer because they aren't being seen first, while the people with more severe conditions who need more immediate help are being treated pretty pretty quickly.
I mean that's just a logical thing to do at the end of the day. People who are in severe condition need to be treated first, or else they're gonna suffer permanent damage or maybe even die. So I don't really see a problem with that. But
Eh, that's probably true to some extent. At the same time, though, I do think that it is the case that in order to be able to evaluate whether or not someone is of high necessity, medium necessity, or low necessity, if you have a large number of people going to the healthcare system, that takes some time to even evaluate who is of high need, who is of medium need, who is of low need. Whereas in the US, they don't necessarily have that problem. So I think that results in a lot of the cost inflations that we see throughout Canada, many other more while Canada's healthcare system is nationalized, it's provincialized, I guess you could say. So it's like the same thing except on a slightly different juris jurisdiction. Um, But yeah, I think that's one of the problems. I'm not saying U.S. is significantly better. It's probably worse, but yeah,
Oh, it is.
yeah,
Yeah. So I'm from the United States, so I can speak firsthand on my experience with that. Um, Pretty much everything is done through insurance, and if you don't have it, you're fucked. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't. I probably shouldn't use profanities. If you don't have it, you're pretty much screwed. Um, Wait times can be abysmal. I've waited over 8 hours to treat a sprained ankle. It's pretty horrible at times. There, of course, if you are like dying, you'll get it done because it has to be done. But at the same time, you're gonna end up paying like
I
five
have, I have
thousand
a
dollars treating
I
it.
have a question. Is the system in the states federal or by state?
It is so. From what I know of the United States healthcare system, is that it's completely privatized. You pretty much all of the hospitals, not a single hospital is owned by the United States government. It is all a private health organization that gets all of its money through the insurance companies.
yeah.
Oh, so
From
it's
what I
not, the
know,
government has no role in it whatsoever.
um,
There's a little bit of role, but you
there
could,
is rule. There's like a bare minimum. Like there has to be government rule in it. Like there have to be laws in place for it and whatnot. But
Oh,
also, the government is not the one running the hospitals. It's all
yeah,
run by private companies.
mm.
yeah, like all.
So
Go ahead. Sorry.
oh, sorry, my bad. So, what do you guys, at least for the Canadian perspective, maybe even more specifically Alberta's perspective, what do you think that changes are needed to make the healthcare system better? What do you think? What's some changes we can make to make it more streamlined, make it more effective for patients, for doctors, for everyone?
For the United States?
For Canada,
Or
Alberta specifically.
oh, I do not live in Canada. I I can't really speak on the Canadian healthcare system.
Is it okay if we like keep it more broad? Like, what do you think is the ideal healthcare system? Like, I know there might be some differences between like jurisdictions and all of that, but I think generally speaking, like a good healthcare system would work well, roughly similarly in different places.
I
Okay.
think I think that there has to be a balance between state and privatization. I feel like if you go too far either way, it gets problematic, and people start suffering at on the behalf of that.
Yeah.
I can't really get much more deep into it because it's not one of the topics I've really like deep dived into. I know like base level, like debate team, like discussion point.
Yeah.
How
I
do you guys think? Oh, go ahead.
yeah, my stance on it is generally that so I think Canada's system is better than the United States because there is
Absolutely, I agree.
yeah, because there is like a strong level of social protection. You know, there's some level of protection. Like I know there's the Affordable Care Act, there's Medicare, Medicaid, all that. Um, with the U.S., it's obviously like there's a lot more. Sorry, with Canada, there's obviously a lot more support there. My main thing, I've always been fascinated ever since I read about it of the Singapore healthcare system, where essentially what they do is they have like completely privately owned hospitals, all of that. They ensure there's strong competition between hospitals, but and they do have some level of like fee that people have to pay in order to use their system. What's really nice is that they put a cap. So if you go over, I think it's $1,000 for most people, and if you fall below a certain income threshold, it's completely free. But for relatively wealthy people, if you go past $1,000, you have to pay that first $1,000, but afterwards it's free. So basically, what happens is that um, say someone has their leg broken or something, that might cost thousands of dollars to deal with. They might have to pay the first $1,000, but after that's completely free. So it's not that big of a deal for them financially for them to deal with that thing. But on the other hand, if something is very minor, they won't necessarily want to go to the hospital or to the doctor's office for that because there is some like very soft disincentive there. You know, is that really necessary for you to go to the hospital for? And so what they see is they see much cheaper healthcare prices. They see very high quality of life there because it's sorted by the financial barrier. I know that Tristan, you're talking about triage. It's essentially like half financial, half like more administrative triage there, where part of the triage is based off of finance, but it's finance as a proxy for need as opposed to as ability to pay at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. One thing I do note here is I'm looking up the statistics, and apparently in Canada, the emergency room wait times are not that different from other countries. But what is very different is the specialist wait time. So if you want to see like a specialized service or like a specialized doctor, it'll take a lot longer than in the States where you can just the highest bidder gets the treatment. But in Canada, specialized treatment, like say if you have a certain condition that not many people have, the wait times are a lot longer than in comparison to the States for that treatment. So just an
Another thing I'd
interesting
like to
thing
clear up for this
noted there.
Another thing I'd like to clear up for the states is that we do still have like programs for people who make less money to get insurance through the government. The government doesn't play a like physical hands-on approach with it. What they do is they can provide payment for it. Like my father works for the government and I get amazing health, like general health care and dental care. So basically, if you're working for the government or if you're a veteran, they will give you your health insurance and they will pay for it. I just didn't clear that up before. Like they do have like a hand in helping citizens. They just don't play a role in like the construction of hospitals unless they're incentivized to do it.
Yeah.
One thing I found interesting when I was in the US is the presence of urgent cares. So, actually, I haven't done a lot of research on them, but I know that pretty much every block, well, not every block, but every like retail center, like every Walmart would have like an urgent care near it. Do you think you could elaborate on exactly what urgent cares are?
So thank God, I've never had to actually go to one. They're more for like you need like for an example, like a patient first, I believe would fall under that category. It's one of the we have down here. Pretty much I've seen them like every block too, and I live in like some county of Baltimore. Um, so from my knowledge, if you have like something minor or something that needs to be at least like you need blood or something, like immediately, they'll take you there and then you'll get transported. It's like a buffer between there and a hospital. You'll get faster treatment. Like they'll tell you, oh, you need to go to a hospital now, and then they'll take you there by a ambulance. But if you have like a common cold or something, or if you just like need stitches, you would go to an urgent care center and they would stitch you up, do whatever, and then send you on your way for significantly less wait time. It pretty much just like buffers between what needs to be at a hospital and what can just be taken care of by a much smaller necessity, if that makes sense.
Interesting. And are these like
I
chain owned or are they like how are they regulated? Are they
I
regulated
believe
at
that
all?
they fall under the ownership of the companies that own the hospitals. I
Gotcha.
do believe, and the regulation would be the same regulation that the government uses on the hospitals.
Um,
Interesting.
I have a question. As an American, do you see any like major political figures wanting to reform the healthcare system to like make it more government owned?
Yeah, we get those a lot. That's a pretty common like standpoint. It's rarely ever acted on. It's usually just used as a political bargaining chip.
Didn't
Like vote for
Vermont?
us for better healthcare, and then nothing happens.
Am I incorrect?
Um,
Didn't Vermont have a universal health care? I'm not sure if they still do, but didn't they at some point have a system?
that sounds familiar.
Well, isn't Bernie
Um,
Sanders the like the governor was he was like a leader for Vermont or something, or he came from Vermont, and he's a big advocate of universal healthcare. If I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, it probably was him, but I'm not the
He
biggest
might
fan
have
of him.
been.
Bit of a clown.
I'm not super familiar with the situation. I was just wondering if you knew more about it.
Is he, oh, okay.
I'm not. So as I said, the healthcare, like, oh, sorry, which track? The healthcare scene isn't really my like field of study. I'm more in like political theory and all that, and like more like controversial topics that are
Fair.
more mainstream.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I have a question.
but
How do you
from
guys?
what I know of the healthcare, what'd you say?
Oh, okay. No, you can continue, you can finish your thing and then I'll go.
Oh no, I'm finished. I was just kind of just trailing off.
Okay. I have a question because this relates to healthcare. How do you guys think the Canadian and American government handled the COVID crisis?
Oh.
I don't think anyone
Okay,
handled it well.
let's not get on that. Okay, let's because TOS,
Yeah,
YouTube, let's
yeah,
not
TOS.
yeah, let's just avoid that topic
Is Peter still
completely.
here?
No, he isn't. Everyone like it's just me.
Gotcha.
I had 3 friends in here and they all left, so yeah.
Gotcha.
To be fair, it's
An
pretty
interesting
late.
fact though, when people have degrees with regards to like nursing or biology or healthcare, and anything in that field, when they come to Canada, they can become doctors. Like, and I learned this because I had a friend whose mom was a nurse in I think it was Egypt, and she came over here and she wasn't able to become a nurse because or she would have to take an entire course. She'd have to go through like the whole uni like route, the whole uni course into med school and redo everything if she wanted to become a nurse. And I think
Yeah.
that's really dumb because if you have like people who are experienced in that field, they should be able to take like a couple tests and just immediately become like nurses or doctors, and that would like really
Right.
drastically reduce the wait times in Canada.
Yeah, I can slightly understand the reason for why that happens because in many of these countries, like I have a friend who currently lives in Bahrain who literally just out of high school, he ended up getting into med school just because like the standards there are so
Yeah,
much lower. Um, so like I
I'm gonna be
understand that
real.
there's huh?
The United States like med school program, like I know I'm not the biggest fan of American healthcare, but goddamn, we have some skilled doctors.
Yeah, like
Like if
in
you
other
need
countries,
if you're willing to pay the money, you're getting fixed. Like it's crazy.
yeah. Like in other countries, the standards are a lot lower. Like you don't have to, for instance, do an undergrad in many places. So like the doctors there are going to be of lower quality. So I kind of understand why like we don't value doctors from other countries as much as we do like Canadian doctors, depending on where they're getting their education from. At the same time, though, I do think that yeah, there is some importance. And one of the issues that could absolutely like benefit with wait times, benefit with um costs, even quality of care is yeah, just having more doctors in place and potentially allowing immigrant doctors who may have had slightly lower education. There's a trade-off there, but I think there's a reasonable trade-off to be made where, yeah, sure, we should allow people who might have slightly lower education levels to come in if that means we have more doctors.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But yeah, it's just I kind of
Makes sense to
I
me.
understand vaguely the rationale behind like valuing doctors differently because yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
Um. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Any other topics you got, Jonathan?
All right.
We have to stay off the controversial ones for obvious reasons, but
Okay,
I
let's
think
stay on
there's a
health.
lot of things that could be fixed. Huh?
Sorry, stay on healthcare. Make sure that we stay on healthcare specifically.
Yeah. Okay. I think there's a lot of things that need to be fixed, but which party do you think will ultimately they do that? Which party do you think will ultimately bring the most change, the positive change in the healthcare system?
Are you talking about the U.S. or Canada?
Uh, it can be for both.
All right. For the United States, the only party I see even like touching on that is the Democrats.
Yeah.
So the party that would bring that change would be the Democrats. But I feel like they need the right leader to be able to do it.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
there's a lot of
Canada,
neoliberals.
yeah. I'd say in Canada it's a lot more nuanced. Well, not nuanced, but it's a lot more complicated because each province basically has kind of a different sort of political party. It's not like just Democrats and Republicans in every province. I mean, the BC Liberal Party is basically conservative, so it's kind of it gets complicated when you go into different provinces and see the political parties. But I
I'm,
think both
I
the
mean
liberal
the
parties, like the party that won't change anything. It would either be the NDP or the Conservatives in pretty much every province that would do make change. And obviously, the Conservative Party would go towards more of a privatized, and NDP would go towards more towards socialized. But um, those would be the biggest parties to make changes in Canada, I think.
So I haven't followed provincial politics too closely as of lately, but as I understand it, isn't the UCP, so they're currently in power in Alberta. Uh, I think they have been in power for a while. Didn't they, for one of Danielle Smith's campaign promises, didn't they have like the promise that they were going to guarantee free healthcare to Canadians still, or to
Yes,
Albertans?
and they didn't do it. They did not do it. As a
Yeah,
matter of fact, they
I
cut
was I
the
was
nurses'
wondering, like,
pay. They cut nurses' pay. It's crazy.
yeah,
They just completely went back on their promise. It was wild to like see it unfold in real time.
I'm not
And
surprised.
I don't think, yeah, I don't think it's as long as the UCP are in power. I don't think there's going to be any real change in anything. To be frank,
Well, there
but
will be change, but it will be in the negative direction, I'd say.
Yeah,
okay, yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of the NDP. I think I'm a pretty staunch conservative, but I think the NDP's healthcare policies are pretty good. If you ignore some parts, so we can't get into that. But I think for mostly it's pretty good. Like free healthcare, like adding like nurse pay, doctor pay, paying them all, like reducing wait times. This things they stand for is on the. It's pretty positive.
Another big thing the NDP campaigned on was building a lot of capacity. And I think that's a big step forward because um, I think one of the reasons that we're not hiring all of these doctors and nurses is because we just do not have the capacity right now in our hospitals. Like we barely have enough like beds in our hospitals to treat the demand that we have. So I think the one big part of the NDP's campaigning that I agreed with was building the capacity, like building more hospitals and creating more. And obviously, the conservatives have campaigned on bringing up capacity in the way of like private clinics and stuff. But I just don't think it's the same as building actual hospitals like the NDP campaign.
you know,
Okay, get ready for a hot take. Get ready for a spicy take. I think the conservatives just need to drop the healthcare issue. I think they need to just drop privatization because it's just really unpopular with most Canadians. The
yeah.
prospect of having to pay out of your own pocket to go to the doctor is just something no Canadian wants. No Albertan wants, no Nova Scotian wants. No one wants
It's
it. They need
something
to
that
drop
no
that
one
shit.
wants, dude. Like when I see my
Yeah,
bank account drop after I'm in the hospital, I feel sad. Like I
true.
wish I wasn't paying for it. Like come on.
And they want to actually get more like a bigger stronghold in like some of the more swing areas in the country. They just need to drop the issue completely. It's something to their complete detriment.
Yeah,
Even
yeah,
even though I do have
I'd say so.
opinions like on healthcare and that I'm a bit sympathetic for its privatization, it's difficult to deny the fact that realistically, like none of my ideas are super popular amongst Albertans. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, I do understand the appeal of like just you don't have to pay. It's so convenient, like all that. You know, one
yeah.
thing though is that
The average. Okay, go ahead.
one thing that I want to speak to about building up capacities. I think that there might actually be a case though from the capacity perspective for privatization because and the US isn't perfect on this either, but there is the problem that if there is demand, like shouldn't we have private institutions to be able to fulfill that demand where they'll be able to detect much better where the demand is lying at all of that to enable, and shouldn't we enable them to be able to do that? And there's problems with the US where essentially in the US, similar to Canada, except with Canada, it's a lot more like obviously the hospitals are public. But in the US, there's in many states certificate of need laws where essentially a private institution, they can't just build a hospital somewhere. They have to go through their I don't know if it's the federal governments or the state governments, but they essentially have to just go
State.
through state governments, go through them and say, hey, we want to build a hospital here. And then they assess, the state assesses whether or not there's an underlying need for them there. Why not just let them build like the hospital where they think it's needed? I feel like there's a much better case to be made that a private institution, given that they have incentives more to be able to determine need, are going to be better able to build a hospital where it is actually needed, and it'll decrease like a lot of the administrative costs when it comes to determining need on the part of, for instance, provincial government, Canada. Like, I think there's a decent case when we talk about the lack of capacity for a role for private institutions. I'm not sure if the UCP is doing a very good job of it, but yeah.
Jonathan,
He isn't
I would
doing a very good job
say,
with anything.
I would say that we're a very long ways away from a private institution building a hospital in Canada. I mean, I
Yeah.
could see clinics being built. I don't think there's
Maybe clinics is a
even
much
a
better
remote
sell.
chance of a hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm talking about my ideal world, like magical idealism. But yeah, realistically, and maybe this should only apply to clinics because clinics are relatively small institutions that there's a lot less inconvenience in building like a clinic as opposed to a large hospital. It's probably like more convenient. To that. So maybe there's like an argument to be made there. But yeah.
All right.
Oh yeah.
What do you guys think about the healthcare system in the UK specifically? If you guys have any knowledge about it,
I have no
I
knowledge.
know nothing.
I
I know nothing about it.
I vaguely know a bit about it, and it sounds like it's just Canada taken to extreme.
The only thing I know is that Northern Ireland has a better healthcare system than actual like the mainland UK. That's all I know. That's the
well,
only thing I've heard.
well, yeah, because they have more autonomy. You know what I mean? Because the troubles, they have way more autonomy compared to other countries inside the United Kingdom. But
Would you
I would,
guys
I would,
say that it would? Would you guys say this is just like a hypothetical question that the smaller a country is, the easier it is to implement a working healthcare system?
Publicly, yes,
No.
absolutely.
That
Like the bigger,
I think that
the
would
bigger a
100%.
country gets, because the United States has 300 million citizens. Maybe my recent thoughts on it when thinking before the debate is that the reason can kind of be attributed to the fact that some countries have to care for a lot more people than other countries do. And then when they get an idea, they can't really easily change the idea for the healthcare system, because if they did, then in like the transfer period between one system to another, more people would not get help they need.
I completely disagree. I think the reason the United States has the healthcare problems they do is not because of the population, it's because of political will. The United States is the richest country in
Well,
the
yeah.
world, it's the most educated country in the world, and it's the most powerful country in the world. If the politicians simply acted on their words, there'd be a working universal healthcare system. But since they have no incentive to, there isn't. It has nothing to do with the population. Like look at China, their healthcare system is decent by what I looked at so far. I'm not saying I'm an expert in the Chinese healthcare system, but it looks decent. And they have a population of what, 1 billion people? I don't think it's the population at all.
What I meant is that I think that the population plays into it, could play into why it doesn't get changed. I mean, of
Here's the
course,
thing.
it's the United States we're talking about. Political stuff always meddles with the United States affairs. That's in everything.
Here's the thing. I think that the Canadians system from the federal level is actually pretty decent. Like when I talk about privatization of healthcare, I'm not talking about abolishing universality. All this is completely universal. Even if someone has to pay like a small fee, if they're above a certain income threshold to get their healthcare, it's still universal because at the end of the day, if they have to spend $100,000, if they have to use a service that's worth $100,000 to deal with something very severe, like that's going to be paid for by the government. So this is universal. I'm talking about, but I think that when the Canadian government, when it says that we are going to leave it up to the provinces to decide their system, but we're going to fund it based on whether or not it's universal or not. So if it's universal, we'll fund your system. But if it's not universal, we won't. I think that's a really good system because what it essentially does is it enables individual provinces to assess their own situation, assess their own citizens' needs in a much better way. I think that this is at the core of the economic calculation problem, just that if you have a smaller population that you're presiding over, you're going to be better able to understand the needs of that population. What's the best way to build hospitals? Where to build them? What precise system do you want?
I
So,
don't think
from a population level, I can see I think that the Canadian system in that respect is actually pretty decent in terms of how it delegates its healthcare.
I wouldn't say that would be a population thing, but more of like a geographical thing because there are literal states that have higher populations than all of Canada, and there are lots of differences between geographically in Canadian provinces, and each province would be able to assess the needs based on the geographical, cultural, whatever situation, economic situation.
But
But
even
I don't think that necessarily has to do with population
but
because
even
if
okay, go ahead.
because let's say like Alberta had like a billion people in it, they'd still all be Albertan. They'd still have like the same issues. I don't think it's necessarily a population thing.
It is partially geographical, but once you start adding on more and more people, it becomes much more difficult for the provincial government to ascertain the needs of the people because there's just more people to keep track of. Like it becomes an issue of calculation where if you say like you have say I'm the government and I have one person I have to keep in mind when providing healthcare to, I can very intimately know all of their needs, all of that. Once I start adding on more and more people, there gets a point in which like just adding on more people, like why not just have a second jurisdiction for that other group of people in order to be able to deal with their needs? Because um, so I do think it is partially a population thing, absolutely geographically as well. Like there's differences in terms of
Yeah.
all kinds of things, like different
So,
cities, different economies, all that. But
so with the United States, would you propose that healthcare be done at state level so it would be easier to know the needs of their citizens?
uh,
It already kind
Well,
of is.
it is dealt with on a state
it
level, but
it
I think that it
has
is.
a very the states have by state, the state government has a very large say on the government affairs within the healthcare system. The federal government lines what it does for pretty much every issue and every department is sets guidelines that can't be crossed, and then most other things are delegated by the states.
I
So
think it's a
healthcare
good
does
idea.
fall under state jurisdiction. And honestly, in that respect, they do pretty well. The problem comes when you have insurance companies boosting prices. That really is
Yeah.
where the problem starts to enter in the American field of healthcare. Like insurance companies are really screwing over American citizens.
Yeah, that's we can talk about like the cost um of insurance. We can talk about pharmaceuticals. Those are also interesting things to talk about.
I have a question. What are you guys' thoughts? I don't know if this is controversial or not, so bear with me. What do you guys thought on medically assisted dying?
Oh my
I
god.
think
Dude,
it's fine. I think it's
It's
I
fine. There's no problem.
I was talking about
I'm
it in my
mixed
ethics
about it.
class.
I would have
It's
to
a
think about
it's
it
a
more.
it's a very interesting subject because like if they want to, then you, is it your job to do that? But also as a medical professional who's supposed to save people, you you have to do that and have that on your conscience. Like, there's a lot of moving parts to it.
I don't think I would trust. I'm not sure how much trust I would put in either individuals to determine whether or not they should die, nor medical professionals in determining whether or not an individual it's in their best interest to die. Maybe in like if you're having like a terminal illness, like in that case, yeah. But I've heard vaguely that there's talk about like if someone's depressed, then medically assisted suicide um is like a good idea. I don't. I'm very uncomfortable with that idea.
Where did you hear that, Jonathan?
I will admit I
think
don't know if
saw that
it's.
too. Let me link the article.
Where did you hear that?
I've heard it
What's
in
your
places.
source?
No, I don't have a source for. I've just heard it vaguely
I
about
don't
it.
know.
Like I don't know if it's.
I think I know what
I
you're
don't know
talking
enough
about.
about it.
I'm finding the article.
So yeah, I don't know if that's something that's actually seriously being considered, or if it's just like certain people are saying that other people are saying this. Like, yeah,
It's like I heard, I he said, she said type of thing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
I'm not familiar with the medically assisted suicide arguments in Canada. Yeah,
I
isn't
think
like
I
Trudeau doing
found
some
it. I
stuff
found it.
about it though?
I think that on an ethical level, it's really hard to decide because, like, medically assisted suicide, someone has to push the button for the person to go, and then that's gonna be weighing on their conscience.
Yeah,
Like, it
Yeah,
really,
I
I wouldn't say
found
that's really the problem.
it's an ethical debate, so there really is no wrong answer. But there are like certain things you have to take into account and realize before giving your answer.
Okay. Well, what I think is if someone is going to die anyway and they're in pain, I think it should be absolutely within a person's right to
sure.
seek
I
medically
think
assisted
that's
death.
reasonable. Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's reasonable, but also there's someone who is unsure whether they're going to die, and if they ask, "Hey, I really want to die. Can you kill me?" I don't know if you should really grant that wish. Like, how far does the personal right go for you to want to kill yourself that they have to abide by? You know what I mean?
yeah.
Yeah, I linked the article. It's apparently true. I don't know. The National Post is the most like uh trustable source, but Canada does offer medical assisted suicide to people who are mentally ill.
What kind of mental illness are we talking about here?
I could read out the article.
Okay. Canada will soon offer doctor-assisted death to the mentally ill who should be eligible.
I think it's mainly for people who are with depression.
Whose sole for people whose sole underlying condition is depression, bipolar disorder, personality disorder, schizophrenia, PTSD, or any other mental affliction. Yeah, like this is what I'm.
That's pretty broad.
That is really broad. Allowing medical aid in dying for people whose sole underlying
Say
condition
again, you
is
cut
one of
out.
those things.
Could you say it again,
that
please?
covers a lot of people.
I think there should be options that you take first. But if you've exhausted every single option, I think as a
Yeah,
like
your
as a
mic's
last
glitching out,
option,
Miguel.
I think it would be. I don't see a problem if you've literally gone to every other option and you still are feeling that way. I wouldn't see really a big problem
Wait, can you
with.
sorry, can you repeat that? Your mic kind of glitched out.
What I was saying is there should be a plethora of options that you have to go through first in order to reach medical assistance in death. But I think if you've exhausted every single option and you're still struggling with that illness, I think it would be permissible. Like, personally, I don't see a big problem if you've exhausted
think
every
that's-
other option.
I think that's pretty immoral because if someone who's mentally ill, they don't make decisions correctly. So how can you give them the like responsibility of making that decision when their brain is literally chemically messed up.
But what I'm saying is that be they should take every other option first, and if it doesn't work, then I I don't know like what the problem would be then. I don't see like who's
Okay,
being hurt at the end of the
let's
day.
use an example. Let's use an example. Let's say that a schizophrenic person was like really bad, paranoia, everything. Let's say he wouldn't stop hearing voices, and then he just one day the doctor's like, "Do you want to die?" And he says, "Yes." You think that's okay?
That's not what I said. I said that
No, but
they should be
if he
forced to take
exhausted
every other
all,
option.
yeah, if he's exhausted all the
Yeah.
options and he just can't stop hearing voices, he should. And the doctor asks if he wants to die, and he says, "Okay." That's okay.
Okay, yeah. I'd say well, I don't know who's being hurt in that situation. Who's who's being hurt in that situation?
The person with the mental illness because they can't make the decision correctly because they're mentally impaired.
Why can't they make
Even
the
if they,
decisions correctly?
because they're mentally impaired, they have a mental illness. Especially for schizophrenia, the voices
Yeah,
tell people
mental
to do
illness
stuff
that
all
is
the time.
giving them a lot of stress and pain.
This is a difficult topic.
Okay.
Hmm.
It's a
Just
difficult
because
topic for
somebody
sure.
is going
This
through,
is
Yeah.
we're
wait,
But
just
debating
what
this.
because
should we do then?
There's
hold
no
up,
What should
plan.
we do if they
hold up.
exhausted every other option? Should we force them to just live even
I
though
mean,
they're in
for,
immense mental pain?
I mean, a lot of people go through a lot of immense mental pain. But they're still kind of staying around. Like you have like people who are like in the prison system. But I guess it's not really comparable. But still, I don't think it's necessarily moral to be killing someone who has severe mental impairment. Like, how would you feel if like um someone who's like below, let's say below the IQ of 75, and they said they wanted to die? Would you be okay with that? And
Okay,
if
Well,
let's
they're
I think
under,
what the main problem would have to be is if they're in severe distress or severe pain is would be the main like conditions for it to be permissible.
okay, let's
But
say a person with the IQ under 75 was in severe mental pain.
yeah,
That's
then I
they're
think it would be okay.
but they're medically mentally retarded.
But they're in severe mental pain.
Okay. I just fundamentally don't agree because it's just
Yeah, I mean
I don't.
that's perfectly fair. I don't blame you. That's just my view, and I totally understand why you would disagree.
Yeah.
it's a difficult question because like on one hand, I do understand the fact that some people do have really hard situations in life. At the same time, though, in order to, when you say that you're going to essentially assist someone in dying, you are presupposing the fact that they are not going to get better already. And I know you talk about exhausting all options, but how confident are we that there is no potential hope for this person? How confident are we that this person will not be able to live a happy, healthy life, or at least a life that's better than not living at all in the future? It's like, is it really in the place of the doctor, that individual, to make that to attempt to ascertain that probability?
And to add
I
on to
think that
that,
we're
This is a very
exhausted
similar.
all no. And to add on to that, if they've exhausted all mental, like they're exhausted all options, that their worst spot ever, it could surely get better, right? Things surely can get better, and and if there's a possibility of getting better, would killing them still be immoral?
yes, it's a question like yeah, it's a issue of like knowledge at its core. Here's a question. Suppose that we had absolute knowledge that someone who was in severe mental distress was going to live their lives in mental distress. We had absolute knowledge for some reason. In that case, would it be okay? Do you think to have medical assistance in death? Like, I think there could be a case in that situation, which we absolutely know that this person is not is never going to get better at all, is always going to live in pain and suffering for the rest of their lives.
Are you asking me that?
Anyone, like particularly the people who
Well,
are like
personally,
against MAID in the first place.
I still don't agree with killing people who are under those afflictions. I think
Okay, but would you agree with killing someone who has a terminal illness
yeah,
that's not
I don't think that
mentally related?
I don't think so either because but I want my views to be made into law because most of my views are based on religious views, like
Oh, that's
religious
fair.
views
Okay.
that I hold. So I don't think just because I could understand if the majority of the population wanted like for terminal illnesses for there to be medical assisted diet, I could understand. But I don't think there's a political or social will for like people who are like mentally ill for them to be have the option for medical assisted dying. I don't think that exists.
I mean, we
That
are.
that
It sounds like,
yeah.
according to this article, it's already a thing now.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is a thing,
Now,
and
as
I
for what
don't
the
think.
popularity of this is, I mean, we can look at it, but
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a very tough
It's
issue,
probably
but
percent of a percent, if anything.
who are in support
yeah.
of medical assisted in dying.
No, I mean people who seek out medically assisted dying.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking about very fringe, like a very small percentage of the population.
absolutely, yeah. I think that we can all
One
agree.
thing I will say is eh, I don't think anyone should recommend it. I don't think it should be recommended. I don't think the government should be allowed to recommend MAID,
Yeah,
but I think that
Yeah,
it should
because
be an option for sure.
Oh yeah,
I've seen stories
honestly
of that.
I agree with that a lot. Like I really don't like government sponsored like personal like
Yeah, for
things
sure.
like assisted, and I think the government really needs to stay within its like lane on that one. Like that is a completely personal thing. It cannot be like you can do this if you really need to. Like it should be something that you
Did I
ask a
disconnect?
doctor when you have a terminal illness. That's my personal belief on it. Because when the government starts doing that, I feel like it's degrading itself, you know?
I could crack a joke, but it's
Oh,
so
can you?
inappropriate in this context that I just won't. I'm sorry.
Sorry. I'm really
DM
sorry.
me.
Can you repeat that? Can you repeat that part? Your mic was kind of cutting off for me. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I think that if the government it starts to like um what's the word I just used for it?
Recommend.
Yeah, when the government
Recommend.
starts to like when the government starts to like recommend things like that, I feel like it's really crossing its boundary as like a government from like the keeping social order into the personal life aspect, and it really degrades
It,
itself, in my opinion.
yeah, I think another reason why I'm not on board with medical assisted dying in general is it gives the government way too much power. It's
Like
I
government
think
sponsored.
I don't.
for government overreach to for its government to recommend someone that they could have the option to die, I think that's just way it's overstepping a lot.
Well,
I think at the
it's an
very
option.
least,
That's the point.
I think
Yeah, if
at
it's
the
an
very
option,
least,
I think it's fine. But if they're actively recommending it,
if
Yeah,
it
of
was
course.
allowed,
Yeah.
I think you have to be extremely careful at the very least when it comes
Mhm.
to how you go about making making public knowledge that this is a law, because I can see a lot of really bad situations happening in which the government, even by itself discussing the fact that it has this, might cause someone who could have gotten better otherwise to like want to get to that option of medical assistance in dying. Like
Yeah,
you
yeah,
have
for
to be
sure.
so careful with that at the very least. And this is saying, even assuming I supported this, I'm not even sure if I would, but at the very, if I supported this, like you have to be so careful.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
And that's actually the other thing that I didn't think about before is that in order for medical assistance dying to happen, it's a question of whether or not the doctor believes that there's nothing that can happen with the patient to have them get better. What if there's a situation in which a patient is trying to trick a doctor into thinking that they'll never get better, even in reality they might? and
I think
therefore,
another
In terms of
component
mental
would
illness?
also be the family. I think another big component in it would be if the family also agreed. And if the family agreed and the individual agreed, I think it would be like
What happens if what happens if the individual agrees and the family disagrees?
then it would be interesting. Then there might be other like routes to consider. But
Let's say that
generally, yeah, you can go.
let's say like there's someone like you said who's like very mentally ill, they're under a lot of anguish, all options are like off the table, and they wanted to die, and but their family said no. Is it does the family have say over an individual's life, especially if they're an adult? Doesn't that undermine someone's personal freedoms?
Ooh, interesting question. I'd have to think about that one. What do you think, Jonathan?
sorry, can you repeat the question?
Let's say there's someone who's mentally ill and they're under extreme mental anguish and they exhausted all options and they
Okay.
wanted to die and they said yes, but their family said no. Would that undermine someone's personal freedoms if they're an adult?
Well, in some objective sense, yes, but is that an immoral imposition on someone's freedoms?
Yeah, because if their
Yeah,
family is basically keeping them alive if they don't want to be kept alive, isn't that not good?
I don't know. I don't know. It's difficult. Like I
Literally,
said,
yeah. No,
yeah.
this is very tied in with abortion. I'd say, like, it's a very similar topic to abortion
Well, with
in
abortion,
some ways.
I'm
there's
sure.
questions of like personhood and all that. Like, but it is somewhat tied. Yeah, true. You could
If we
definitely
ever do
jump
an abortion episode, I'm just not going to go in there. I would immediately get banned.
in. No, you would. Okay, there's pro-lifers around here. I'm sure. Like,
Okay.
like yeah, like you would not get banned. I don't think. Like if you're pro-choice,
Okay.
pro-life, whatever. I doubt it. But yeah, we're not talking about abortion.
Speaking of abortion, are we not? Is this not? Doesn't abortion cover healthcare?
let's
Like, doesn't healthcare
let's
cover
skip
abortion?
that topic and maybe
I
some other
I
time.
feel like I feel like abortion it does tie into healthcare, but since it's such a widely debated
Contentious
thing, it has like brought itself past
into like its own field.
healthcare.
Even medical assistance in dying could be its own episode. But yeah, abortion is like such a huge topic that man.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
yeah.
it's a huge topic in the states. In Canada, it's just basically decided. Like both the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party are like pro-abortion.
Yeah, in
And
Canada.
then here's the real question: does healthcare fall under let me find a good word for this. Capital punishment. Does that fall under healthcare? What do you guys
No,
think?
no, that doesn't.
Yes,
No.
yes.
We already had the
Didn't we have
episode
a
on the death
debate on that
penalty.
100%
already?
that does.
We already discussed that.
Didn't we already have a
100%.
debate? Yeah,
Yeah.
I was in that one.
Yeah, I was too.
I wish I was in that
That was
one.
that was a fun discussion. I enjoyed
That was, yeah.
very constructive.
That was a very interesting one, yeah. Man, we
Okay,
got
but what if a
like a-
prisoner? What if a prisoner wants to die? Then what? Then what?
okay, that just
Oh,
gets
keep them alive.
What if
That's
a
you-
prisoner is having a baby and wants an abortion, and the baby wants to die?
And at the same time, they want to die, but
Yeah, exactly.
okay.
No,
Let's
here's the real
let's
one.
just
Okay, here's the real one. What if someone was pregnant and they're sentenced to death? Like,
Oh my god!
Oh,
Yeah,
that's an interesting question.
Let's cover all
okay.
three.
Let's
no,
cover all
wait,
three
do
topics.
you,
Okay.
no. Do you wait for them? No, hold on. Wait for them to give birth and then execute them, or just execute them immediately? That's the real question. Think about it.
Oh,
Oh no.
Realistically, you'd wait. Realistically, you'd
and what
wait.
if they want to die on top of
Realistically,
that?
Yes.
Okay. Let's oh my god.
There goes your video, my guy. It's gone now.
This is-
Susan Wojcicki's gonna take that down. It's
Um,
over. It was over before it
It's
started.
Jover voice.
It's Jover.
It's so over.
No, okay. I think it's
The
been about
Discourse
an
is
hour. I
falling.
think we've gone across. We've went in a whole bunch of different directions. All very interesting. Do you guys
Yeah.
want to make any closing statements? Do you want to end it here?
I think that was the perfect
Yeah, I
closing
think-
statement.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that was.
Okay. Yeah. That was in and of itself. That was a great closing statement. So yeah, we could.
We leave the audience with an ethical question for them to solve.
We leave the audience with an ethical question. If
Comment down below.
if a prisoner is about to
Debate in
get
the
killed,
comment
should they have
section.
an abortion? What if the baby wants to die or whatever?
What the fuck?
No. It was if someone was
I-
pregnant while sentenced to death and they wanted to die. That was the question.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Let's not get it twisted.
There you go.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Okay, well, I'm gonna stop recording now. We can talk a little bit after the recording stops. So yeah,
All right.
to the viewers at home,
Yeah.
thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time on the next episode of the Youth for Discourse podcast. Thank you.